these questions appear, I will try to answer them. So a lecture in osteology. We will discuss such issues as bone as an organ, and also development and growth of bones. So at your practical classes, I think now all of you have practical classes in anatomy from the 5th week. You were discussing some organization issues, and you were also saying that this semester you will study locomotor apparatus. And so locomotor apparatus, it is also Greek term. Loco means place, motor means movement, consists of two parts, active part and passive part. Yes, you were saying it. So passive part of locomotor apparatus is presented by bones and joints. So these are those organs which cannot move themselves, but they provide stability of our body. Yes, they support the shape of our body, and by means of actions of active part of locomotor apparatus, passive part can move, can approach each other, or can get further from each other, and so on. So passive part of locomotor apparatus, that is bones and joints, and active part of locomotor apparatus is presented by muscles. Muscles, they consist of muscular tissue that is able to contract. So during contraction of muscles, their length decreases. And for skeletal muscles, for example, we can say that they start from one bone and they end in the other bone. And so during contraction, one bone approaches another bone, and so on. So we will start this semester, and totally anatomy studying, we'll start with structure of bones that belongs to passive part of locomotor apparatus. And that part of human anatomy that studies bones is named osteology. Also at your practical classes, you were discussing that many anatomy terms, many medical terms have Greek origin. And this osteology is also Greek term. It consists of two parts. This word consists of two parts. Osteo means bone, and logi means teaching, logos, teaching. So osteology, it is a part of anatomy that studies bones. And totally you will study bones for 2 months, because the first month will be about the bones, all the bones except bones of the skull. And during the second month, you will study bones of the skull only, because bones of the skull have much more complicated structure than all the other bones. At the previous lecture, we were discussing a term organ. And so this term, we were saying, if you remember, that organ, it is a part of human body that consists of definite tissues and has a definite structure, location, and performs definite functions. So each bone is also an organ. Each bone is an organ, because each bone, you have already begun to study it and to discuss it. Each bone has a special location in the body, yes, and it consists of several tissues, and today we'll talk about it, and we will also discuss in details this issue of tissues in histology, yes, in the second semester. So it consists of several tissues. It is bony tissue. So Laya Abyari, I'm asking you not to try to go on ear, because you shouldn't do it. To go on ear means you will be visible in the camera and you want to tell us something. Yes, and today nobody has to tell anything. Bone consists of several tissues: bony tissue, cartilaginous tissue, and loose connective tissue. Each bone has its own vessels and nerves, though it seems to us that bone is so hard. Yes, it consists of only calcium. It's actually not like that. Each bone has its own vessels, blood vessels, and nerves, and without blood vessels, without blood supply, bone will die also. So each bone has vessels and nerves. It has a special structure, form, and location. and performs definite functions. And bones actually perform many functions, not only support muscles, we have already discussed it, yes? Not only maintain the shape of human body, but many other functions. They perform role of short and long leverages, yes, and they participate in mineral metabolism because very many calcium and phosphor ions are present in the bone, and actually all the time, constantly, some calcium and phosphor ions, they enter the bone, some ions leave the bone into the bloodstream. Such a complicated process is regulated by endocrine glands such as thyroid gland and parathyroid. We'll discuss it in the second semester when we start studying internal organs. The other function of bones, it is hemopoiesis. Hemo means blood, and poiesis means formation. So formation of blood, it is the other function of the bones. Not all of them perform this function, but those which have medullary cavity and those which have bone marrow inside. About it, we will also talk during this lecture. And the last function, it is electrolytic balance in the organism. Electrolytic balance in the organism. So everything is much more complicated than you thought when you studied at school. Yes, it's not only something hard where muscles are attached. So this thing you studied at school, when I was talking to my students at practical classes, actually all of you know that skeleton of human body, totally in human body, in adult person, there are 206 bones. 206 bones. This is an exact number for adult, because in newborns, in children, many bones consist of several fragments, and that's why, yes, total number of the bones is much larger. And we can see here that in the skull there are 22 bones. Well, we will say actually they are 23 if to count also hyoid bone. And in the vertebral column, we have already said there are 32 or 33 vertebrae. And in bones of upper limbs, they are 64. In the bones of lower limbs, they are 62. And thoracic cage includes 25 bones. So one sternum and 12 pairs of ribs. So totally they are 25. Total weight of all the bones in human body, it is 5 to 6 kilograms. So if we wouldn't have bones, then our weight would be 5 to 6 kilograms less than now. So here we can see that bones comprise from 12 to 15% of a total weight of human body. For females, it is 12%. For males, it is 15%. So if we look at this table, this diagram of body composition, we will see that storage fat, it's about 12 and 11% in females and males. And muscular tissue is 34 for females and 46% for males, because so in males, muscles are usually better developed than in females, due to the difference in the hormonal level, of course, yes. So, and vice versa, fat is better developed in females. It is 12% in females and only 4% in males. So other organs, internal organs, the weight of internal organs, for females it is 30% of total body weight, and for males it is 24% of total body weight. This issue, I think you studied at school, so how bones are composed, chemical composition of bone. And if we take a bone of recently dead person, we take it out from his body, we clean it from all the other tissues, then we will see the following composition. So untreated bone. 50% of bone, it's water. 50% is water. Like, yes, it's very difficult to imagine because bones seem to us to be so hard, so dense, yes, but nevertheless, 50% it is water. 16% is formed by fat. And the other 34%, so only 1/3, yes, these are organic and inorganic substances. So inorganic substances, these are calcium mainly, calcium and other salts. They comprise 22%. And organic substances, icein, the main organic substance of the bone, it is icein, this protein type of collagen. It takes 12%. Those bones which you see at our classes, at our lessons, these are bones which were treated especially, like we were boiling it for a very long time, and by this way we removed water from the bone and we removed fats. So such bones are dehydrated and defatted. And if to take such a bone, we will see that inorganic substances, they form 2/3 of the bone, and organic substances, it's only 1/3. When you visited our anatomy museum at the first lesson, your teachers asked you to pay your attention at this preparation. Yes, it is present at our museum. It is decalcified bone. So this is the bone from where calcium, and yes, mainly calcium, was removed. How was it done? The bone was just placed into the solution with hydrochloric acid. And you know, if you studied chemistry well at school, you know that if we take hydrochloric acid and add calcium there, then calcium chloride will be formed. And so it will be bonded very firmly, like it is very stable chemical substance, calcium chloride. Such a bone, you can see, is very elastic. Yes, we can tie a knot from such a bone. By this experiment, we actually proved that inorganic substances give bones natural density. So it is dense due to these ions, yes, calcium, phosphor, and so on. Organic substances are needed for their elasticity. So such a bone from where calcium, so inorganic substances, were removed, such a bone became very elastic, but is not dense anymore. If to boil a bone for a very long time and to remove even ossiin, not only water and fats, but ossiin as well, so these organic substances, then bone will stay dense, but it won't be elastic. So any damage, any trauma of such a bone, and it will get broken because it's not elastic. It cannot change its shape because there are no more organic substances. So inorganic substances, once again, I want to tell you, give bones natural density, and organic substances are needed for their elasticity. In the internal structure of bones, two types of substances are distinguished. It is compact bone that is found on the surface of bones, forming a protective outer coating, and cancellous or spongy bone that is found inside. So it is like a loose network, yes, loose network. And they are formed by different ways, and they have different morphofunctional units. We'll talk about it later. So, but in any substance of the bone, everywhere in the bone, if we look into the microscope, we will mainly see 4 types of cells. It is osteoprogenitor cell, osteoblast, osteocyte, and osteoclast. Actually, processes of bone development never end in human body. So they end only with the human's death. So person dies, and these processes of bone growth, they end. So at a certain age, certainly at the age of 20 or 22, the growth of bones ends. But in case of fracture, for example, if bone was broken, then some processes, they try to update maybe. I don't know why you don't see. Actually, presentation, the other people, do the other people see the presentation or not? So, Laia, try to refresh the page maybe, try to press it again, try to enter again, and maybe you will see the presentation. Okay. So, yes, what I wanted to say. In case of fracture, when the bone gets broken, yes, processes of bone restoration, like healing of the bone, they start. And these processes, they are provided by these 4 types of the cells, which I have already named. So first, yes, 4 major types of bone cells. First, these are osteocytes. Osteocytes are the mature cells within bone that account for most of the population of bone cells. So osteocytes do not divide. They are formed from the osteoblasts, and they have, you see, numerous processes. Between them, there is the main substance of the bone. It's like matrix, yes, and they are connected with the other bones, with the other osteocytes by means of these processes. So they form the main, like the major population, yes, of bone cells. Well, I don't know why you cannot see the picture. Maybe then you should start, when you should try to enter through the laptop, not through the mobile phone. So if the other students see, it means the problem is in your devices. Yes, try to enter through another phone or through the laptop. If you look through the laptop, it will be even better because you will see a big picture. Yes. Okay. Osteoblasts is the other type of bone cells. They are bone precursor cells. They secrete extracellular matrix on bone, and once the cells get embedded within the matrix, they become osteocytes. So first, osteoblasts are formed, and they start forming a bone. How exactly it happens, we'll discuss later. When osteoblasts complete formation of the bone, they turn to be osteocytes. Osteocytes. There are also osteoclasts. Osteoclasts are cells involved in the resorption of bone, the destroying of bone. Yes, these are giant multinucleated cells with numerous cellular processes. So bone can live for a definite time, but when the time comes when osteocytes die, then osteoclasts destroy this bone tissue, and at this place new bone tissue is formed. That is the function of osteoclasts. And osteoprogenitor cells, these are stem cells which can produce osteoblasts. They are located in the inner layer of the periosteum and in the endosteum. It doesn't depend on me. Like it doesn't depend on me. I cannot change any settings. I didn't prohibit any watching through the mobile phone. You are trying, I think, to watch through the browser. Yes, you should install application. There is a special application, Webinar. You can install it in the phone, and I think in this way you will see everything. Okay. And so how a compact bone is formed? There are osteocytes. First of all, there are lamellae, like plates, circular plates. They are named lamellae. We can see it. And between each plate, there are osteocytes. So these plates, lamellae, they are formed by special substance, a matrix, extracellular matrix with calcium. So between lamellae, there are osteocytes. In the very center of central lamella, there is a central or Haversian canal through which artery passes, capillary. No, it brings blood vessel. Yes, that brings blood into the bone. So this lamellae with osteocytes in between, and also Haversian canal in the center or central canal, it forms osteon or Haversian system or osteon. So osteon, it is morphofunctional unit of compact bone. So everywhere in the compact bones, we can see osteons or Haversian systems. Blood vessels in the Haversian canals are connected with each other and with periosteum, this outer layer of the bone, by means of perforating or Workman's canals. And that's how blood comes inside the bone. Yes. Okay. Spongy bone is formed in different way. There are no osteons. There are just osteocytes, and they are surrounded by trabeculae. These trabeculae are also formed by extracellular matrix, and they form like networks between which blood vessels pass to supply spongy bone. So here we can see osteoblasts from outside, which are aligned along trabeculae of a new bone. So there is no osteon here, just chaotic dissemination of these trabeculae, which are formed by extracellular matrix, and between them there are osteocytes. That is the structure of spongy bone, and it is located mainly in the center. Yes, compact bone is located in the periphery, and spongy bone is located in the center. Now I want to show you the video of bone structure. So look, here you can see first osteons. Yes, compact bone that consists of numerous osteons. So lamellae, yes, between lamellae there are osteocytes, and in the very center there is Haversian canal. These are osteocytes. And in deeper there is spongy bone. So here you can see there are no osteons. Yes, there are just trabeculae through which blood vessels pass between the trabeculae, and there are also osteocytes. That is what we discussed, yes, previously. To demonstrate you better, now you saw this video. When you began to study the bones, your teachers told you that you should describe bone according to a definite plan, and one of the points of this plan includes bone type. So according to the types of the bones, they are several, they are 6 to be more precise, yes? So long bones, short bones, flat bones, sesamoid bones, also pneumatic bones, and irregular bones are distinguished. So now we will discuss each of them. So first, long bones. Long bones mainly form skeleton of the limbs, so upper and lower limbs, in free part mainly, upper and lower limbs. So for the upper limb, we can say there's a humerus, radius, ulna, metacarpal bones, and phalanges. And for the lower limb, it is femur, fibula, tibia, and metatarsal also bones, and again phalanges. So the main function of the long bones, it is action, movement. Yes, they are long. They act as leverage. So if small muscles, even small muscles that is located between 2 big bones, it contracts, then one bone, or like, yes, will try to approach another bone, and a very big movement will start. Yes, so they act as leverages, these long bones. The main function is movement, but it's not the only. So long, or the other name, it is tubular bone, typically has 3 parts. It is diaphysis, like the longest, and the middle part is body of the bone. Middle part, or diaphysis, middle part or body of the bone. Then proximally and distally, so from both sides, there are epiphyses, which are the ends of the bone, and they are usually thickened. And between diaphysis and epiphysis, there are metaphyses, like such intermediate zone, part of the bone between diaphysis and epiphysis. This part is very important because it will provide the growth of the bone. For the bone to increase its length, so increasing of the bone in the length, it is a function of metaphysis. There are some more parts, not obligatory, like facultative, yes, optional, let's say, so optional parts of the bone. They are apophysis. It's usually, these are processes, different processes. They are apophysis. They are inconstant in the bone. They can be present or absent. That is the structure of a long bone. And so in the body of a long bone, in the diaphysis, inside, there is medullary cavity. So first, from outside, there is compact bone. We can see it. Yes, it is formed by osteons. Then a little bit internally, there is spongy bone. And even closer to the center, there is medullary cavity. Medullary cavity. Inside the medullary cavity, there are blood vessels and nerves. And also there is bone marrow. Bone marrow. Bone marrow is a part of a long bone that provides hemopoiesis. It's present not only in the long bones, it's present also in flat bones. So, and it participates in hemopoiesis. So red bone marrow consists of mature and immature red blood cells, white blood cells, and stem cells that produce them. Yellow bone marrow contains mostly fat cells. So in the very beginning, in children, red bone marrow is predominant. So nearly most part of bone marrow, it is red bone marrow, because processes of blood cells formation in children, it's very active. With the time when person gets elder, when there are not so many active processes of blood cell production, then red bone marrow gets substituted by yellow bone marrow. But in case of any accidents, for example, when person loses blood after the surgery, maybe after any trauma, when yes, when person loses blood, yellow bone marrow can again get transformed into red bone marrow, and these processes of blood cell production, they will again get activated. Okay. So short bones, they are present in the hand and in the foot. These are carpal bones and tarsal bones. These bones, they mainly provide stability. If long bones, they provide movement, so they move. Then short bones, they are merely like, there is movement, but it is very slight movement, and they provide stability. Short parts are present also in the vertebrae, so body of vertebrae, they are short, and it is necessary to provide stability. Flat bones. The main function of flat bones, it is a protection. That's why usually flat bones are present in the cavities, which enclose some vital organs. Like we can say that bones of the skull, there are many flat bones in the bones of the skull because bones of the skull form cranial cavity to protect the brain. Yes, we cannot live without the brain, so it's vital. There are bones, ribs and sternum, which you studied for the first lesson. Both of them, ribs and sternum, they are flat also because they form thoracic cage. And in the thoracic cage, there are lungs and heart, and it also requires protection. Scapula is also flat bone. Some part of hip bone is also flat because hip bones, they form pelvic cavity, and in the pelvic cavity there are also important organs like rectum, urinary bladder. So the main function of flat bones, it is protection. Pneumatic bones are present only in the bones of the skull. There are many pneumatic bones in birds, for example, because birds, they fly, yes, but for humans, pneumatic bones are present only in the skull. These are such bones which contain in themselves ear-filled cavities. Like here we can say frontal bone has frontal sinus, and sphenoid bone has sphenoid sinus. Temporal bone has also special ear-filled cavities in the mastoid process, and so on. Why do we need these cavities? To decrease the weight of skull bones, because skull, our head, it occupies the uppermost position in our body for most part of the day. Yes, to decrease the load onto our neck, like cervical vertebrae and all the other parts of vertebral column, skull contains many pneumatic bones. Actually, this is to decrease the weight of skull bones is not the only function of these pneumatic bones. At the next lecture that will be about craniology, we will say that they also participate in formation of our voice, and they serve to for additional heating and humidification of the air, and so on. So it has many functions. For today, we are interested just that it serves to decrease the weight of skull bones. So these are pneumatic bones. Irregular bones or mixed bones are such bones which combine in themselves two or more types of bones. When you began to study vertebrae, you said that all the vertebrae except atlas, yes, they are irregular because they combine short and flat part. Short part is the body. It is, yes, it is short because it provides stability. And all the other parts, arch and all the processes, they are flat. They are flat because for the arch and the processes, the most important function, it is to protect spinal cord that passes in the vertebral canal. So that's why these bones, because they perform many functions, they are irregular. One more type of bones, special type of bones, these are sesamoid bones. The largest sesamoid bone is patella, though there are some inconstant sesamoid bones in the foot, for example, in the close to the metatarsal bones. Yes. So sesamoid bones are those which are enclosed by tendons. So they are surrounded by tendons of muscles from all the sides, and they serve to facilitate the movement, to facilitate the muscle contraction. Look, now I will show you the video. Look, when there is sesamoid bone, and it, like this tendon of the muscle, it slides along the sesamoid bone, and it's very easy to perform any action by contraction of the muscle. So look again, it's quite easy, yes, to perform extension. If there is no sesamoid bone, there is no block around which the tendon of the muscle slides. And then you see it takes much more force, it takes much more power to perform the action. Look again. You see it's difficult now to raise up this stick if there is no this block. So that is the function of sesamoid bones, to act as blocks around which tendons of muscles slides, and it facilitates the action. Okay. That was about classification of the bones. The other point in the plan, when you describe the bone, you should name part of the skeleton. So first, let's talk about what is the skeleton. Yes. So skeleton, all the bones of the body connected with each other form the skeleton. It is Latin term, skeletus, means to dry or dried. So all the bones together, we said in adult people, they are 206. So all of them together, they form skeleton. So a skeleton, like all the other bones, like all together bones, they perform supportive, protective, and some biologic functions, such as mineral metabolism, yes, we have already said, and hemopoiesis, formation of blood cells, and so on. And so all the bones of human body, they are divided into two main parts. It is axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. Axial skeleton, here we can see in this picture, forms an axis, the main cord of our body, yes? So you began to study vertebrae. We know that vertebral column, for example, it belongs to axial skeleton, as well as skull, yes? And thoracic cage, so ribs and sternum also belong to axial skeleton. The other bones form appendicular skeleton. So some appendicular means something extra, something additional, yes? So appendicular skeleton, these are bones of upper limbs and lower limbs. But these bones of upper limbs, they are also divided into bones which are more mobile and less mobile. So there are bones which are directly attached to bones of the trunk. For upper limb, it is clavicle and scapula. They are directly attached to the bones of the trunk. That's why they are not that much mobile bones. And they belong to bones of shoulder girdle. Girdle like belt, yes, like shoulder girdle. For the lower limbs, bones of pelvic girdle, that is hip bone. So because they are directly attached to bones of axial skeleton, they are slightly mobile, and they form bones of shoulder girdle and pelvic girdle. The other bones for upper limbs, it is humerus, radius, ulnar bones of the hand. These are bones of free upper limb. They are not attached to the bones of the trunk. They are just they are just attached to the bones of shoulder girdle. They are more mobile, and that's why they are bones of free upper limb. For the lower limbs, this is femur, tibia, fibula, and bones of the foot. Also, they are not directly attached to the bones of the trunk, but just to the bone of pelvic girdle, that is hip bone. So they are bones of free lower limb. So that's why, for example, if you describe femur, you will say that femur is the bone of appendicular skeleton, and you should also say that it is the bone of free lower limb, and it will be a correct answer. This diagram you saw at the previous lecture when we studied embryogenesis, and you remember now that there are several stages of embryo development. So first zygote is formed, then blastula, gastrula, and you know at the stage of gastrula, embryo, like this gastrula embryo, consists of 3 layers. It is multi-layered embryo. So there is outer layer ectoderm, middle layer mesoderm, and internal layer endoderm. And so why do we see it again today? Because we want to say that all the bone tissue is developed from the middle embryonic layer, mesoderm. Here we can see it. So you remember that mesoderm is actually divided into many parts, into several parts. Vertebrae and sternum, for example, they are developed from paraxial mesoderm, and skull from mesoderm surrounding the brain, and appendicular skeleton, it's formed from somatic part of lateral mesoderm, so from somata pleura, if you remember. Yes. So how exactly they are formed? So a process of formation of bone cells, it is osteogenesis. And mainly 2 types of bone formation are distinguished. It is intramembranous ossification and endochondral ossification. Intramembranous ossification, it is a direct conversion, like all the bones, all the bone tissue is developed from the mesenchyme. Mesenchyme, we studied it at the previous lecture, it is a derivative of mesoderm, yes? So intramembranous ossification, it is a direct conversion of mesenchymal tissue into bone, so without any intermediate stages. And it occurs in the bones of the skull. To be more precise, it is typical for bones of cranial vault. We'll talk about it later. And most of the bones, they are formed by means of endochondral ossification. So mesenchymal cells turn into cartilage first, and from the cartilage into the bone. From the cartilage into the bone. So with this transitional or intermediate stage. Cartilage in Latin will be chondros. So that's why, like through the cartilage. So from the mesenchyme to the cartilage, and then only from the cartilage to the bone. So let's discuss first process of intramembranous ossification. After the formation of mesenchyme, so these mesenchymal cells, they come to the place where bone will be later formed. And they develop here ossification center. So how does it happen? So mesenchymal cells, they join each other and they turn into osteoblasts, yes? And that is, you remember, osteoblasts are the cells which produce extracellular matrix. And first, these osteoblasts, they began to produce this extracellular matrix. Extra means outside. Cell, it's cell, yes? So matrix, substance that is produced and it stays outside of the cell. And this matrix is able to bind, to join calcium salts. So here calcium comes, and with the time calcification of this matrix take place. So calcium and other mineral salts, they are deposited, and extracellular matrix calcifies and it becomes hard. When osteoblasts see that there is everywhere around them, when osteoblasts are completely surrounded by extracellular matrix, then these osteoblasts turn into osteocytes. You see, now here they are very similar with osteocytes, but still they are osteoblasts. But here they are already osteocytes. And then the next stage, it is formation of trabeculae. So extracellular matrix develops into a trabeculae, like network structure, yes, that fuse to form spongy bone. Spongy bone. For compact bone, it's some more complicated, like osteons must be formed, yes. So, but finally, here in the center, osteocytes are present, and between them, between them, there is extracellular matrix, and from outside, periosteum is formed. Periosteum includes a layer of osteoblasts. So periosteum, we will later say, it is that part of the bone that provides increasing of bone width. So metaphysis is responsible for increasing of bone length, and periosteum is responsible for increasing of bone width. And so there are osteoblasts there in the periosteum. And in the center, there are just osteocytes and trabeculae between them. That's how intramembranous ossification takes place. In endochondral ossification, I told you, yes, it's some more complicated. So first, it's formation of primary bone model. Mesenchymal cells meet in one place where bone will be formed. And these mesenchymal cells first get transformed into chondroblasts. And these chondroblasts also produce this extracellular matrix, and first everything is formed by the cartilage. With the time, these chondroblasts, they turn into chondrocytes, and chondrocytes in the very center, they start increasing their sizes rapidly. They become hypertrophic chondrocytes, and after that, they die. They undergo necrosis. And there is empty place there. With the time, into this empty place, vessels come, and so oxygen and nutrients come here, and more chondrocytes, they become hypertrophic chondrocytes, and they die, and there is an empty places formed that will become medullary cavity in future. After that, osteoblasts are formed here, and they substitute this cartilage by bone tissue. So, and everywhere in the bone, after that, there is bone tissue, except this metaphysis. Metaphysis, that is a part of the bone between diaphysis and epiphysis. Here in the metaphysis, there is growth plate that is formed by chondroblasts. Yes, chondroblasts. And they provide growth of the bone in their length. At a certain age, 20 or 22 years old, this growth plate disappears. Actually, this age, this time is different for different bones. That's why, using this information about time of disappearing of growth plate, we can identify human age. If, for example, somebody died, yes, and we can get nothing, just his bones. For example, he died in the fire, yes, and we cannot identify his personality. So basing on this presence or absence of this growth plates in the bone, we can identify his age. Osteoblasts, they appear in certain places in the bone, so mainly in diaphysis, yes, from the very beginning. And so an ossification process, this formation of ossification centers, it starts in intrauterine period. It occurs mainly in diaphysis of all long bones and some epiphysis, such as head of the femur, distal epiphysis of femur, proximal epiphysis of tibia, cuboid bone, and so on. So primary ossification nuclei appear during intrauterine life. But secondary ossification nuclei, they form after birth. So when after child is born, still there are very many parts of the bone which are formed by cartilage. And only after the birth, this cartilage will be substituted by bone when secondary ossification nuclei are formed. So that's how it works. That is endochondral ossification. Now I want to show you another video about this development of the bone. Please take a look.
Bone formation, also known as osteogenesis or ossification, is the process by which bone tissue replaces embryonic connective tissue to form the skeleton. From childhood to early adulthood, ossification lengthens and thickens bone. In addition, the process of ossification is used throughout life to remodel bones. There are two methods of prenatal bone formation. During intramembranous ossification, bone is generated on or within fibrous connective tissue membranes. As the process begins, mesenchymal cells differentiate into osteoblasts in regions called ossification centers. The osteoblasts secrete osteoid or uncalcified bone matrix. Over a few days, osteoblasts become osteocytes, and calcium and other mineral salts are laid down, hardening the matrix. The bone matrix develops thin columns of bone called trabeculae, which fuse to form spongy bone. Blood and lymphatic vessels grow into the surfaces of the newly formed bone and develop red bone marrow. Outside of the bone, a dense layer of connective tissue called the periosteum forms. Most outer layers of spongy bone are eventually replaced by compact bone, but the center remains spongy. Intramembranous ossification also occurs with skull bones in childhood. At birth, skull bones are separated by fontanelles, or soft spots, and sutures, immovable joints made of fibrous tissue. Fontanelles in the fetal skull allow for easier passage through the birth canal and rapid brain development. Up until adolescence, the fontanelles slowly ossify into sutures, providing the brain with greater protection. Endochondral ossification, the replacement of cartilage by bone, occurs in most bones of the skeleton. The process begins when embryonic mesenchyme condenses, forming the cartilage model, the shape of the future bone. The model grows within the fetus. Lengthwise growth is attained via interstitial growth. Width is attained via appositional growth. A nutrient artery penetrates the perichondrium, increasing nutrient availability to the cells. Osteogenic cells are stimulated to differentiate into osteoblasts. These cells secrete matrix beneath the perichondrium that forms a thin shell of compact bone known as the bone collar. As the perichondrium begins to form bone, it is now called the periosteum. The bone collar reduces diffusion to the cartilage inside the model, depriving it of nutrients. Capillaries grow into the disintegrating cartilage, delivering osteoblasts. The new growth forms a primary ossification center, an area where bone tissue will replace most of the cartilage. Osteoblasts deposit bone matrix, building spongy bone trabeculae. The growing model is gradually remodeled. The cavity fills with capillaries and red bone marrow. Ossification proceeds, forming the main portion of a bone, known as the diaphysis. Around the time of birth, blood vessels enter the epiphyses, the ends of a bone, forming secondary ossification centers. Secondary ossification differs in that no medullary cavity forms, and ossification proceeds outward. As a result, the interior of the epiphysis remains spongy. Secondary ossification leaves a thin layer of hyaline cartilage covering the epiphyses. This is known as articular cartilage, and it reduces the friction and shock in bone joints. The change to the epiphysis also forms the epiphyseal plate, a layer of hyaline cartilage that enables the diaphysis to grow in length.
So that's how it happens. Probably it's slightly difficult for you now, but I hope that you will understand. At the next lecture, we will discuss it again when we discuss processes of skull bones formation, and I hope that with the time it will get more clear for you. So this is the process of bone development. Yes. So yes, we have already said it several times that increasing of bone's length, it is due to the epiphyseal growth plate, and increasing of bone's width, it is due to the presence of periosteum. So both epiphyseal growth plate and periosteum, it contains osteoblasts. Yes, like it first contains osteoprogenitor cells, and then they get transformed into the osteoblasts, and they produce extracellular matrix, they get transformed into osteocytes, and so on. So periosteum, as well as epiphyseal growth plate, they are very big. They are very thick in children, in newborns, and in children, because in them processes of bone growth is very active. And with the time, epiphyseal growth plates, they disappear at all. But periosteum never disappears, because I told you there are different cases, like it can be fracture or just bone cells die and they need to be substituted by the other cells. So periosteum is always present, but it becomes very thin in elder people. So here you can see it. It is fibrous covering surrounding that part of the bone that is not covered with articular cartilage. So it is from outside, yes. There are two layers in the periosteum. Outer layer is the fibrous layer, and inner layer it is osteogenic layer. So outer layer, it serves only for the protection of the bone, and osteogenic, it's that layer that contains osteoprogenitor cells, which can turn into osteoblasts and start producing new bone substance. So periosteum is attached to the bone by sharpest fibers. That's why it's not so easy to separate periosteum from the bone. So sometimes we have to do it when we need to remove part of the bone, but we want to preserve periosteum. And the last point that you have that I have to discuss with you today, it is special features of a newborn skeleton. Actually, we have already said today, many things. We said that first of all, yes, skeleton of newborn contains much larger number of bone fragments. So if in adult people there are 206 bones, in children and in newborns they are much more, they are more than 300. Yes, And yes, we also said that there is a big amount of cartilage tissue, because still there are no secondary ossification nuclei, only primary are formed, yes? And due to the active processes of growth of bones, there is a significant thickness of the periosteum. Yes, periosteum is thick, and rich vascular network, especially in the neck of the bone, this in the metaphysis, yes, where there is a growth plate. And in bone, in medullary cavities, there is only red bone marrow, mainly red bone marrow. The elder person is, the more yellow bone marrow is in the medullary cavities, and in the newborns, it is just red bone marrow. So these are the main special features of a newborn skeleton. So that is all I wanted to tell you for today. Thank you